He is one of the biggest names among visual novel developers. They're lauded for their emotional stories, rich in character writing and drama. Their works include stuff like Clanad, Little Busters, Canon, Air, and Summer Pockets. Even anime adaptations of their works are highly praised, which is unusual for anime adaptations of visual novels. They are highly regarded by VN and anime fans alike. Personally, I've been less than impressed with their stories that I've experienced. They came across as overly sappy, trying too hard to invoke emotions without really earning it. They don't appeal to me at all, but I can kinda understand why they've garnered such a fan base. However, one of the recent games caught my eye. That's Sui no Stella, or Stella of the End. On the surface, it does have nice art. What really got my interest was the scenario writer Romeo Tanaka. He's worked with Key before on Rewrite, which I haven't read but had thought about playing because he was involved. What I know him for is for writing Cross Channel, which is a heartfelt story about the hardship and beauty of human connections, and one of the best VNs I've read, in spite of the English translation being less than ideal. I wanted to read more stories by him to see if they were all of similar quality. While Rewrite does look kinda neat, he didn't write all of it, and I've heard legends of its length. Stella of the End seems like a good opportunity to check out something shorter and see how it compares to something like Cross Channel. Let's get into it. Stella of the End is a story about a desolate world. Like so many stories before it, machines have essentially taken over the world, and humanity is on the decline. The once great technology that was the foundation for human civilization are now rare relics of a bygone era. Jude Gray is our protagonist. He's a courier. He delivers packages to clients and delves into ancient ruins, scavenging technology to sell. One day, he receives a job from a mysterious and seemingly wealthy client. A simple job: retrieve the assigned cargo and deliver it to the client. The cargo turns out to be a robot girl that Jude awakens. She looks and acts extremely human-like, though she's undoubtedly a machine. Together, the two must go through an arduous journey throughout the ruined world to get her to the client. Okay, so this setup might sound a bit derivative or unoriginal. A guy and a young girl going through a road trip adventure in a post-apocalyptic world might remind some of things like The Last of Us or that one Walking Dead game. Reminded me of Girls' Last Tour in some ways too. If you're familiar with stories like this, you probably will know how the story will go. It's a tad predictable. However, I believe Stella of the End is a very well executed and told story. Not a scene is wasted in the short time the narrative has. It wisely chooses to focus on the relationship between our two leads, June and the robot girl he names Philly. There are only a couple other named characters. The total amount in the story is enough to easily list on one hand, so our two leads do all the heavy lifting for the story. Jude is the uncommon VN protagonist that's an adult, which means he has a bit of history to him, which is explored in the game. He's not exactly a selfish person, but he is fiercely pragmatic, which has allowed him to survive in this harsh world. He at first only sees Philly as cargo that he needs to deliver, but he obviously starts becoming attached to her. This causes some fascinating inner conflict for him, as he has some past trauma and knows he'll eventually have to just give her to the client, so he tries to distance himself and tries to see her as only a machine. The slow development of their relationship is really well done and satisfying to see play out. Philly, on the other hand, is his complete ideological opposite. He's cheerful, optimistic, and has this idealized view of humanity. He's averse to seeing other people die, even if it means that she gets hurt. He refuses to even hold a gun. This is of course at odds with the bleak world the story set in. He can come across as annoyingly naive, which I think is intentional. It makes sense why she thinks this way. He was literally created to serve humans. He was programmed this way. He's a machine, and a newly awakened one at that. Jude has endured hardship and knows how unforgiving the world is. She's essentially a child. Her ideals get the duo in trouble on more than one occasion. Her ideals don't match up with reality. The story really goes into humanity's capacity for cruelty and violence, often causing its own destruction. Philly's idealism is nice, but the story shows how flawed her way of thinking is. This is what makes her development in the story so interesting. He has to come to terms with the flaws of her ideals and mature. Jude's development, in turn, is about how Philly's compassion rubs off on him. The story presents both of their ways of thinking as flawed. Rushing into danger is foolish, but is having compassion for others truly a bad thing? That's the main theme of the story, the ideal versus the real, altruism versus egoism. It's about finding a balance and synchronizing each of their respective worldviews. Anyway, her development is fantastic. Normally I'd complain about how she feels too human at first. Normally I think it makes more sense when a robot character starts out as robotic and gains more humanity throughout the story, like Aegis in Persona 3. Philia right off the bat fits right in with humanity, to the point where even Jude is surprised. She seems to feel emotions and has a ton of empathy for others. In the context of the story, this actually makes some sense. Because the technology was so advanced, I could buy into the idea that she was programmed like this, so she could perfectly blend into humanity and be more appealing to humans. Her unrealistic ideas are ironically what make her feel inhuman. They're things that actual humans aren't naive enough to believe in. Her development is about her becoming more human like Aegis, but for her, that means accepting that humans aren't perfect. I would be remiss if I didn't mention how cute she can be, which does elevate the general dark tone of the story. Her relationship with Jude feels surprisingly realistic. They're initially only with each other for their own reasons. He wants to deliver her to his client, and she wants Jude to teach her about how to be human. They have their ups and downs. Jude is understandably frustrated by her refusal to hold a gun or defend herself. Her ideas to help others puts them in danger on a number of occasions. You can't stay mad at her too long though, even with her constant mistakes. It's like a father that's trying to guide Philia on the right path, so she can survive on her own. While these two are the central focus of the story, the narrative does a surprisingly decent job at world building. Jude is pretty knowledgeable about technology, so he goes on some tangents about how things function. The setting itself might not exactly be the most original thing. The whole AI robots bring humanity to ruin thing has been done countless times before. I do think the story has an interesting take on it. The machines aren't actually super malicious towards humanity. It's more that they're completely indifferent towards them. There's these giant robots that are more like natural disasters, destroying whatever gets in their way. But they only go after anyone dumb enough to upset them. The story shows that the humans themselves are just as capable of cruelty towards each other. It shows the good and evil things humans are capable of. Even the bad people Jude has to face aren't evil. They're only like that because of circumstance. We easily sympathize with Jude because he's the protagonist, but these other people are also just trying to survive in their own ways. The pacing of the story is excellent. It doesn't waste a single moment. Each scene has a clear purpose. In short, it takes around 10 hours to read fully, but it almost feels longer than that, in a positive way. It really feels like a journey. In our short time together, I found myself getting attached to Jude and Philia. Their struggles were entertaining, which all culminated in a very satisfying ending. On primarily a character-driven story, there's a couple action scenes that were rad. They were tense, thrilling, and perfectly demonstrated how ruthlessly capable Jude could be. The presentation is stunning. The artwork for the character sprites and CGs is beautiful. The main artist is Swab, well known for their work on Arknights. I feel that their art style was perfect for a dark sci-fi story like this. The art can evoke the grit and harshness of the world, but also captures beautiful moments. There's a decent amount of CGs for the length of the story. They all look wonderful. I appreciate how Jude has sprites and how he's frequently shown. Some other VNs don't like showing the protagonist and giving them sprites, so I'm glad that's not the case here. The music is good. I don't think any track stood out much, but it's all effective while you're experiencing the story. If you're familiar with Key, you might notice that Stella of the End has a lot in common with another of their stories, Planetarian. Planetarian is also a short VN set in a post-apocalypse, where a guy meets a robot girl. I consider Stella to be its polar opposite in many ways. Planetarian demonstrates all the good humans are capable of, to an overly optimistic extent. It's sappy, predictable, and everything I dislike about Key stories coalesced into a 3-hour story. Stella, on the other hand, is more pessimistic in its approach and view of humanity. Yet even with these differences, I think they both share a common theme, and overall have an optimistic message. Even with all I've said about how Stella explores humanity's destructive tendencies and selfishness, it does have an uplifting message about the ability to change, and finding happiness in a world so bleak. It comes across as more sincere, because it's willing to acknowledge the ugly, selfish side of humans, but still says that a brighter tomorrow is possible, if you're willing to show compassion to others. In conclusion, I had a great time with Stella of the End. It won me over with 2 wonderful characters, an engaging journey, and resonant themes. I've heard that some Key fans aren't overly fond of Stella, because it's such a departure from what Key usually does. That's understandable, but ironic because that's precisely why I enjoyed it so much. It's definitely the best Key story I've experienced, because it appeals to my sensibilities far more than the others. I have Romeo Tanaka to thank for that. I should really check out Rewrite considering how much I enjoyed Stella. Maybe next year. Anyway, I can easily recommend this game for people who want an enjoyable, short VN. Even for non-Key fans like me, I think it's worth it because it offers something new. It's not the best visual novel I read this year, but it excels at what it does, and I'm happy I read it. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. Big thanks to my friend Chris for editing the script.